welcome to another vlog. This one's a little different. I'm kind of excited about this. So I put my head to one side instead of trying to be in the middle because I am saving some space for some photos I'm going to put up. What we are doing today is we are looking at some baking fails, and I'm hoping I can give like some suggestions on how to improve that. So just in case you have ever had this happen to you. So let's get started. So this first one is a banana bread recipe. Okay, first of all, it looks like it wasn't very well mixed because the bananas, like you can see pieces of them in the dough still. You should not be able to see pieces. It should be well mixed throughout the dough. Second of all, you greatly underbaked it. What you should always do when baking anything is make sure it's done before you take it out of the oven. In this case, banana bread is very cake-like, and so you test it just like a cake. You stick a toothpick into the middle and see if it's clean. If it's not clean, then it's not done. In this case, this person clearly did not do that, and hence your bread is incredibly underbaked. Please check if your things are finished before you take them out of the oven, and if they're not, then you can continue to let them bake for a few more minutes until they are ready. Yeah. I just think it's funny that you wouldn't check. Why would you not check to see if it's done? All right. Okay, now rainbow cookies are really hard to make. You wouldn't think so, but the one on top, the way you do it, there's a specific technique, is you start in the middle, the color in the middle, so you'd start with purple, and you'd roll it into a snake, and the dough, into a snake, and then you would freeze it. Take it out of the freezer, and then wrap the blue around the top, put it back in the freezer. Take it out of the freezer, put the green on the top of that, put it back in the freezer. Take it out of the freezer, put the yellow on top of that, orange, red, and then once the whole thing was completely frozen, you cover it with this white dough. Then you take the frozen dough, okay, after it's been frozen with the white on it too. You take the frozen dough and then you cut it into slices and then you bake it. It's actually quite a long, involved process. Clearly, the one below did not freeze it. Or if they did to get it into the shape, they did freeze it, then they let it thaw before they baked it. And then everything ran together. You can't do that. You can't do that with these. You have to do everything frozen. If it's not frozen, it's not going to look like it should. It's not going to keep its shape. It's just physics. I can relate to this. I hate freezing dough. I hate chilling dough at all. So I can relate to this one, but you have to follow the technique. If you don't, then it's not going to turn out. That's the price you pay, by not following the instructions. All right, now I don't know what this one was meant to be. Is it some sort of like caterpillar, I guess? Are those straws sticking out of it? With like marshmallows on the end? I don't understand this at all. Like what the logic was. But probably the number one like problem with it is that the buttercream is too thin. Is that even buttercream? It looks more like a glaze. You don't frost a cake with the glaze. This is going to be a common theme because a lot of these baking fails have this same issue. You don't frost a cake with glaze unless you want a glazed cake. If you want it decorated, it needs to be buttercream. It needs to be thicker. It needs to have some sort of consistency that you can smooth and it will keep its shape. That's the point of buttercream. Other than that, it's not a bad concept. I don't like the teeth on it. Like, why would you put these fake like marshmallow teeth on it? Like in what world would that look good? It's not going to. The M&Ms are fine. Those don't bother me, but are those straws? Because they look kind of like straws, but at the same time they don't, because if you look at the ones on the left, it is on the left side, then you can see them kind of sticking out slightly from the cake, which looks like they're stuck in with a toothpick. Well, if they're stuck in with a toothpick, then there's some sort of candy. It just looks bad. Like, who came up with this? And I'm not sure what you were thinking, and besides, antennas are never as large as the legs. I'm not sure why you would think that. Who? whatever you were thinking, this isn't it. This was not the best idea you've ever had. All right, once again, thin buttercream. Have we mentioned this before somewhere? Did you want it glazed or did you want it frosted? Because this is more like a glaze. This is not a frosting. It needs to be about twice that thick, if maybe 3 times, because this is way too thin. It's just the thin frosting is dripping off. It is not real frosting. That is glaze. You don't use glaze, okay? You use okay, this is powdered sugar, basically mixed with probably milk or possibly water, who knows, and then colored. That's not bad for a glaze if you want to glaze donuts, but not to frost a cake with. Bad idea. I have tons of buttercream recipes up, and some of them are actually really easy. So use one of those, don't use this. So other than that, like, it's stacked okay. Like, the cake itself looks relatively proportional. This would totally be fixable with some decent buttercream. So if I were presented a cake like this and wanted to fix it, it's totally fixable. I would unstack the cake, take everything off. I would scrape off as much of the glaze as I could. I wouldn't stress about it though, because I'm just going to recover it up. I just don't want it dripping off. So I would take off of that, and then I would frost the bottom tier, support it, put a little cake board underneath, and then on top, and then I'd put the top tier on top. Make sure that you could frost it before. I'd usually frost it beforehand, and then stack it. Voila, you're done. You might have to touch up a little bit. That does happen. Other than that, like, it's not hard to do this. It's not hard to make a stacked cake. It's just that you have to have the right tools. Do not use glaze. That's my advice. All right, this one I don't know what is up with the eyes. Like, that's the thing that bothers me the most. The cookies that are stuffed like in the mouth, you have to break them in half before you put them in, because otherwise they look like you're just literally stuffing food in somebody's mouth. And I don't think anybody appreciates that, and even Cookie Monster. You want something that looks like Cookie Monster, then you're also going to want something that gives you that fur texture. So what they had used in the original was a grass piping tip with the blue. You have to have decent buttercream. Once again, the buttercream is too thin. If it is slightly too thin, it's almost the right consistency. There's a fly, sorry, go away. But what in the world is up with the eyes? What made you think that that would look good? Those are not circles, those are squares. And, like, is that a cookie as like the pupil? Because Cookie Monster has black pupils that are always looking in different directions. The small cookies around the edges doesn't bother me, that's fine. But break your cookies, yeah? And pipe your frosting. That's my advice. Chocolate covered kiwi popsicle. That is not at all a bad idea. Okay, first of all, your first mistake is that you put your sticks in the middle. Like, why did you do that? Is it just easier to get them to stay, I guess? But look at the original, the sticks are on the side. There's no reason why that shouldn't it shouldn't be a problem. Like, I don't understand why you didn't do that. And then, this is not chocolate. It looks more like fudge or something like that. It might be ganache. But if you want the thin layer of chocolate, you have to use melted tempered chocolate. You can't do this. And remember, kiwis have a very high water ratio, which means that these are probably going to work best if they're very cold, so that not very much water mixes with the chocolate as you dip it, and then it sets up faster. But if you don't do that, you might actually get some problems with your chocolate. You don't want it to seize, which is maybe what happened here, but it doesn't really look seized either. It just looks, almost like cocoa. Like, I don't know what you were thinking or what made you think it would turn out the same, because you clearly didn't follow the instructions. I'm just saying, follow the instructions. Okay, this is one of several rainbow cakes. And I'm going to harp on the same stupid things. Your frosting is too thin, okay? Another thing about rainbow cakes is that they're a little bit delicate because they're so thin, such thin layers. And so what you have to do in order to make them stable enough to stack like this is you have to freeze them. I have talked about this before. Like, make sure you level them beforehand and then freeze them in the freezer, like frozen solid. And then when you're stacking it, make sure you fill in any gaps with buttercream. Thick enough buttercream that it sets up. And then this is not a problem. I'm not sure why people don't do that. It's really easy. So this is like, okay, so rainbow cakes. Freeze your layers. Level them, wrap them in plastic wrap or like aluminum foil. Freeze them, and then when you stack them, you do it with a layer of buttercream just to even out the layer because it's not quite straight, and you won't have this problem because 6 thin layers should stack relatively well. It shouldn't collapse unless your cake is very, very soft and your buttercream isn't compensating for that. So you need thick buttercream. You can't get away with this thin crap. This looks like the stuff you would buy like in a can. Those are not made for stacking. Those are not made for filling and stacking. Those are made to frost the top of like a sheet cake if you don't know what you're doing. So if you know a little bit what you're doing, make your own buttercream. Better than this, please. Jeez. All right. Who has had this happen? Oh yeah, okay. Don't stress about it. This is basically, this is savable if your first batch turns out like this and you still have some leftover dough. Add some more flour. You clearly don't have enough. Another thing you could do is try and chill your dough a little bit so that it doesn't spread as much, but this clearly doesn't have enough flour. Add more flour. This was on like a gluten-free like recipe or something like that. And gluten-free flour is a little more difficult to use. However, you can still add more. You can also use cornstarch instead. Like, just thicken it up if you can't have gluten. You can't use thin batter and then expect the cookies to turn out. All right, now I saw this photo and I was like, I don't understand. Why is this a fail? And then I saw the edges are like crumbling. Dude, this is not a fail. It happens. You sometimes get crumbly cake. What do I do? What would I do to save this? Like, I don't even think there's anything wrong with it. Freeze it. Have we mentioned this before? You want your cake to be more stable, make it cold. Yeah? Put it in the freezer, in the refrigerator for as long as you can. And then once it's really cold and really stable and no longer leaving crumbs on your hand when you touch it, then you can frost it and you can fill in those gaps easy. That won't even be difficult. Make sure you have decent buttercream. and then you can totally save this. This is totally edible. I would eat that. I would eat that. So this is not a fail. This is just a mistake. Okay, who ever told you that cupcake cups are stable enough to bake without a cupcake form? They are not. The only reason that they make those cupcake cups is to make them easier to take out, and so they're like more sanitary and easier to carry around. The point of those cups are not to bake with. It's to make it easier to eat after. You have to put those little paper cups inside of a cupcake pan. You can't do it on a flat pan. I've seen some that are made out of silicone that are made to do it like this. I don't think these are them though, because not the way that they're bending, they look like paper to me. You can't use these. You can't use these. Nope, 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 nope. So I am saying that was really silly. Don't do this. All right. Yeah, baking with M&Ms, you would think like the picture perfect ones always look so beautiful. No, 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 no. Look at the picture perfect ones first. The M&Ms you can see and see the color on are on top, which means they put them on after it was finished baking. I have done this. I have made a recipe for cookies with M&Ms, like M&M cookies. And in order to get the picture perfect ones, I put s'more on top after they were baked, because what happens when they're baking, they lose their color. This is really common. So I don't see this as a fail necessarily. I do think that they need to work on their recipe a little bit, because this recipe looks like chocolate and the other original recipe was not. It was vanilla, clearly. So if you wanted the M&Ms to show up, don't use chocolate. Like, that's just silly. But the way that the color spread, that's perfectly normal. In fact, it did it on the original. It's just that it's harder to see because their batter was slightly thicker, so it didn't spread to the top the way it did in the fail. But I don't really see this as a fail. I think it's fine. I'm sure it's edible. I'd eat it. Okay, this is what happens when you don't set your timers for your baking pies on Thanksgiving. Always set your timers. Don't leave them in the oven too long. These were clearly not only overdone by like 5-10 minutes, this was like a half hour plus that they were in the oven past when they should have been taken out. This is a fail because you forgot to set your timer. Set your timers if you're concerned about this. Ditto here, like this is just burnt. This is just straight up burnt. You left them in the oven too long. Period. End of sentence. Like, you need to take them out earlier. Set your timers, yeah? All right, this one I see as a fail because number one, the cake that they wanted to make, like to copy, is a fondant cake. And the cake that they made is a buttercream cake. Also, why were that hands like above the head? Like, nobody's hands are connected to their head. SpongeBob has like shoulders, and like, I don't understand why you would ignore that. But plus, this cake that they were trying to copy is quite complex, and it's very difficult to copy a character exactly without a template. You'd need a template for this. But even if you had one, which they clearly did not, you can't copy a fondant cake with buttercream. And if you were trying to, then you shouldn't use buttercream that's so thin that all you're seeing is like your eye melting off of the cake, because you layered this like glaze consistency buttercream on top of itself. Then it's going to spread like this. Like, that's just physics. You need thick buttercream. If you're going to mold something with buttercream, it is possible to do with buttercream. It's not going to look the same as the fondant one. But this is why I don't understand people when they say, oh, I don't like fondant, and so I don't want a fondant cake. Dude, you don't have to eat it. But if you're looking for an aesthetic that looks like fondant, you're not going to be able to get that with buttercream. It's not going to look like fondant, no matter how much you want it to. So this is my soapbox for the day. If you want someone to mimic a fondant covered cake, you're going to need a fondant covered cake to do it with. And don't use glaze consistency buttercream. Use real buttercream. Yeah, I have lots of recipes. Yeah. All right, this one. Okay, the first image is actually not a cake. That's a topper. That is an edible image. So I can't blame anybody in the world for not being able to copy that. But if you are going to try, what you do is you print out a picture off the internet and then like carve it into the cake with like a toothpick, and then you follow it. If you don't do that and you try to freehand like they did here, this is what you get. And it's never going to look right. Plus, you didn't color your buttercream very well. It's not bright colors. The hair is not pink. It's red. Like, you need it to be red. If you're, the blue's okay. But like you didn't have any skin color. It's white. I don't understand what made you think that was going to look similar. Also, this appears to be on a cupcake cake. Those are notoriously difficult to frost. So don't feel bad if it looks kind of wonky and weird. It's kind of meant to, but in that case, buy the edible image and put it on top. Save the day. I don't even have to worry about it, So if that's something that you want to have, but like, you can copy an image if you print it out the right size and then, trace around it, but like, you don't freehand it. Don't freehand it, especially if you're crap at this. Like this is just ridiculous. And on the plus side, the buttercream is reasonable consistency. Like you could have done something with that, but not anymore. Jeez. All right, these are two fails. The cookies are just straight up overdone. Like you probably left them in at least 20 minutes, maybe even half an hour, because cookies should usually bake for about 10 minutes. This is just ridiculous. The pot, I don't know what's going on there. What were they trying to make? Is that gravy or is that like cake batter? You overfilled it. I'm not even going to say any more than that. You overfilled it. Next time, use less. Okay, I do not know how stuff like this happens. Like there is a paintbrush in your bread. It must have been in your pan when you put your dough in there. How did you miss that? I don't understand. Now, what I'm guessing is that somebody bought a paintbrush and was using it for baking. I'm hoping only, although with the bristles paint colored like purple, I don't know. If you were only using it for baking, then you could like use it to spread some like butter in the pan, something like that. But I don't recommend this at all. And plus that the tinted like bristles, I doubt that that was the case. I would not eat this. Okay, this is a fail to the point of toxicity. Don't eat this. You could maybe cut like the part of the bread off that was touching it, but I don't know if I would even risk that. This is to the level of being dangerous for your health. Don't eat this. All right, I was looking at this and it took me like 10 minutes to figure out what the world happened. How did that happen? And I finally concluded, I'm pretty sure this is a pizza. I was like, how did you do that to a cake? And I thought it was like a fruit cake or something. But as I looked at it and I realized the only thing that makes sense is that this is a pizza. You can use the like wire rack for frozen pizza because that's stable enough. It's also partly pre-baked. That's stable enough that it would be okay, but you can't do that with like raw pizza dough. You need a pan underneath it to support it until it's baked through enough to be stable enough to sit on a wire rack. I'm assuming this person likes crispy crust, and so they're like, oh no, I like it crispier. I want to put it on the wire rack. Fine, if it's frozen, sure. But if it's not frozen, don't do this. It's a very bad idea. This is what will happen. Yeah, the dough is just straight up not stable enough to do this. I don't recommend this at all. So, and it would be really annoying to clean too. All right, these owl cookies I don't really see as a fail. The only thing that I would say is what's going on with like is that cocoa powder you put on the wings? Well, you should have brushed it with like a paintbrush to get it rest off because it looks ridiculous. The rest, I don't mind it. I don't think they did a terrible job. The only thing I would say is that the cookies spread slightly. So if you want that not to happen, you need to chill your dough and you need to not use any leavening agents. No baking powder, no baking soda, nothing. Like that's my best advice. You use like a shortbread or like a sugar cookie recipe that doesn't spread. But you have to chill your dough if you don't want them to spread at all. But I don't actually hate these. I think you need to brush off a lot of that cocoa powder that you used on the wings. That looks a little silly. Other than that, I think they're kind of cute. Yeah, I would eat that. All right, once again, I'm going to repeat myself a lot on this one. Your buttercream is too thin. I'm guessing the original was made out of like a thick royal icing piped with a star tip. Yeah, that's going to be really hard to pipe, I'm not going to lie, but it is possible. But what you made was like made with, once again, glaze, and it looks like you just dumped it on the top. I don't know if you tried to pipe it, but like the only other thing I can think of is that they did pipe it and it looked okay, and then it got too hot and it melted the buttercream. Another possibility, but I doubt it. It just looks so weird. Like So this is an actual technique. What they're actually piping on top of is a like an ice cream cone put upside down. And I've seen these before. I've even made one before. Although most regular ice cream cones are too tall for something like this, you kind of have to cut them down. But in general, yeah, this works if you have decent buttercream. People work on this. Frosting is important. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to work on the video, but this is a GIF of somebody like trying to pry a spoon out of what looks like some sort of frozen dessert. I'm guessing it's like frozen fudge or something like that. Why would you do this? This is like the baking equivalent of leaving an instrument in somebody's body after you've operated on them. Why would you do this? Like, if you see that if you drop the spoon into whatever it is you're making, that can happen. Take it out, you know? Take it out, try to smooth it out a little bit, clean up the spoon. It's no big deal, but like don't freeze it with it in it. That's silly. That does look frozen to me. That doesn't look baked. Good luck with that. You might have to throw away the whole pan. I'm not gonna lie. Some more burnt cookies. Turn your oven down. It's too hot. All right, this one, I feel like the person who made it did not do a bad job. The thing is, the top one that they were trying to mimic was a cherry pie with very little juice. I'm not sure how good that would taste. But what I think they did is they put cherries inside the head so that it would keep its shape. And you can see how bumpy it is on the top. So I'm pretty sure that's how they did that. The bottom one, they clearly did not. Also, this is an apple pie instead of a cherry pie, so the color contrast isn't there. It's not going to look as good. Like, it's not a fail necessarily. It's just that there are a few little tiny things you need to tweak. Use a cherry pie instead of an apple pie, or the blackberry, or something that's dark. Or, yeah, something that's dark colored. And then also fill the head with something. In this case, it was cherries. I don't know if you could fill it with blackberries and have them stay in there. I don't know what else you could fill it with. If you have any ideas, put them in the comments below. But I don't think this is a fail. I would still eat that for sure. I don't know why you would want to mimic that, though. That's kind of a weird look. I wouldn't actually want to eat that. I'm just saying. The top one, I mean. Just because of the way it looks. But, I mean, I'm sure it tastes good. Cut it first, and I'll take a piece. Yeah, but I don't want to eat the head. It's weird. All right, this one I don't see as a huge fail either. The top one, I have seen these before, is a baking mold. You can buy a pan that looks like this. And clearly the bottom one tried to do it without one. So they ended up trying to mold it and like put coconut on it. But the top one is piped and the bottom one is just pushed coconut onto it, which is fine, but it's not going to look the same. I don't think it looks terrible. I just don't think it looks like the top one. That's all. You need to learn how to pipe. You know, if you really want to make it look piped, then learn how to pipe. Okay, this is super common. This has totally happened to me. Gingerbread houses are a lot harder than they look. They look like, oh, no problem. I can put that together. Yeah. This is, it's really hard to get it to stick together properly. It tends to fall down. I don't think they did a bad job. This is just how gingerbread houses go. So don't stress about it. It's no big deal. It's edible. Eat it. It's yummy. All right. If you want the one on the left, then why did you use brown frosting? You know? Did you think they would look the same? Because it's definitely not going to. Like, I don't understand. Like, they cut it properly. I think that the cut is actually okay. But you used completely different frosting and somehow expected it to look the same. The one on the left is frosted with white buttercream and then pressed coconut on top of it to give it some texture. The one on the right is frosted with brown frosting with no coconut. If you don't like coconut, that's fine, but it's not going to look the same. Like, once again, you can't expect things to look the same if you don't use the same technique. This one I also do not consider a fail. The only major difference that I see is that the gravestones were not piped like they were in the original. Also, they don't have those little pumpkins. They're kind of hard to find around here anyway, so yeah. Other than that, I don't see this as a fail. You need to let your ganache set up slightly before you put your crumbs on top. Other than that, it looks fine. Yeah. Once again, you cannot make a cake, like mimic a fondant covered cake with buttercream. And once again, your buttercream is not thick enough. Like, you can't use this thin glazy buttercream and then expect it to look good. Also, you need some lessons on piping and frosting. Like, the cake on the left is, it looks like a professional did it. It looks like a cake that you would order from a bakery. But the cake on the right looks like you're like, oh, I can do that. Thinking that you can do what a professional, geez, stupid fly. I hate the fly. That you could do what a professional has been practicing doing for years just by, piping a little bit of very thin buttercream. You can't do that and just expect it to look good. You need some practice first. Practice a little bit before you can be confident enough that you can do it. And yeah, don't belittle other people's cakes, because this feels like a belittling. This feels like, oh, I can do that. What they're doing isn't that special. Guess what? They're much better at it than you. So, all right, the cake on the left actually looks pretty difficult to me. It's kind of higher level, has the stencils on the side, things like that. That's kind of a tall order, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. If somebody came to me and wanted a cake like this, I would say, oh, I'm not 100% sure I can do that. I don't have those kind of stencils. I could freehand something, but I can't guarantee it's going to look like this. This is what I would say. I'm just going to be honest. But I will do my best, yeah? But if you don't have the experience, and which they clearly do not, or else it would look better stacked, then you're not going to be able to mimic something that's already at a relatively high difficulty. What you need to do, if you want to stack, like practice stacking a cake first, practice frosting a cake, use thicker buttercream. This is going to be my mantra today. And also the flowers on the top of the one on the left are either real or very good fake flowers. The one on the right are fondant flowers, which don't even look that great because you don't have the practice. You know what I mean? Yeah. Plus the color is way off. Like, I don't know what made you think that this was going to look good. I honestly don't. You don't know how to stack a cake, then you can't make a stacked cake. You know what I mean? Okay, this one clearly wasn't trying to imitate the one on the left. The one on the left, I've seen these around, although I don't usually do them with a drip, but yeah, I've made a couple like this. It's not that hard. It's I would say it's like, it's something that if you've been cake decorating for a little while, then you could probably make. Yeah. The one on the right, like, what in the world were you thinking? This is a bundt cake? Bundt cakes are meant to be taken out of the pan before you frost them. You don't frost a bundt cake in the pan because they weren't meant to be cut inside the pan. They're going to be hard to get out. Like, what were you thinking? Like, who doesn't take a bundt cake out of the pan first? Like, you just threw some different colored, like, unicorn colored frosting on it and just called it good, and then wrapped something around a, I don't know, stick or something, and then it was like, that's a horn. You weren't trying. You were not trying. So I'm not even going to say how to save this because you didn't even try. So why should I? Okay, this one is clearly a case of my ganache was not set up. uh, Thin ganache is liquidy and it's really hard to use. You have to let it set up. You made the ganache, you probably even did it right, but you have to wait. You have to wait a couple of hours or put it in the fridge for a while, because the one on the left had like had probably set up or almost completely set up before they put in the decorations. And then the one on the right, the pigs themselves aren't horrible, but the fact that the ganache was so thin and it wasn't keeping the stability meant that it wasn't staying up. You could fix this. You take all the decorations out, scrape off the ganache, make a new batch, let it set up first, and then try again. But you'd have to get some new Kit Kats, because those are really, really messy and it's going to be hard to fix. So it's not like complete fail, but it's pretty dang close. Like, ganache is harder to use than you think at the beginning, because everybody says, oh, ganache is so easy to use. Well, it is and it isn't. You have to get it to the right consistency. What I like to do before I use ganache is I like to make it the night before I'm going to use it and let it set up overnight. And then in the morning, it's a nice, thick, like buttercream kind of consistency. But if you don't do that, you get this. I'm just letting you know. These are some Peppa Pig fails. I don't know if I need to say anything about this. The one on the left is fondant covered, so it has a little bit of shape. Peppa's arms and legs are super duper skinny. If you ever watch the show, they are basically sticks. So that in and of itself doesn't bother me. The face looks awful. However, that being said, I did make a duck cake for my daughter's second birthday that looks kind of similar to this. So no judgments here. It's just a beginner. It's okay. It's not that bad. Okay, I would still eat this. The one on the right, I'm pretty sure this was a prank. Those are extraordinarily phallic, and I would never serve them to a child. I'm just saying. That's not Peppa Pig. That's for a bachelorette party. Moving on. Once again, rainbow cake fail. We've talked about this. Freeze your layers, use decent buttercream, let it set up properly before you frost it, and it won't collapse on you. I'm just saying. All right, these are just burnt underneath. If you have a problem with this kind of thing happening to you, what you should do is turn your oven down, because clearly the tops are not getting cooked before the bottoms are burnt. So turn your oven down about 10, maybe 20 degrees even. And also move your rack up, because if your rack is too low in the oven, then you need to move it up higher so it doesn't get burnt underneath before the top gets done. So that's my advice on that one. Okay, cream is too thin. Your cream is too thin. Is that whipping cream or is that yogurt? Because if it's yogurt, don't use it as filling. The other option is you can put it inside like a ring, like a cake ring, and with acetate on the outside, you could fill it in and then freeze it. And then take it out and unwrap it, and then it will be frozen and still inside. That's another thing you could do, but I wouldn't do that with fresh fruit, because then the fresh fruit would be frozen and then it's no longer fresh. Just saying. Okay, full disclosure, I have done this. You've overfilled your pan, or you've used too much leavening agent. Another thing that has happened to me with a red velvet cake is that I added the baking soda and vinegar, and then I immediately put it in the oven, and then it did this. What you should do is add the baking soda and vinegar, let it stand for like 5 minutes, let it calm down a little bit, and then put it in the oven, and then this won't happen. So either use too much leavening agent or just overfilled your pan, like whichever one it was. I have done this. It happens to everybody at one point. Don't stress about it. What's annoying is cleaning the oven afterwards. So good luck. This is very funny because with banana bread and like other kinds of, those quick breads, or cake as well, is that what happens is you put it in the oven and the outside edges bake first. Yeah, they get solid, they get nice and firm, and then it rises. And as the inside rises, it makes cracks in the surface, and then batter can leak out of that. That does happen all the time, and that's why you get that distinctive like crack look on like quick breads and things like that. So in this case, I don't know how it happened like this, but it made a crack in it, and then the batter came out in like a stream. It makes me think that your oven is not level, like it's like tilted. Otherwise, I don't know how this happened. Like and it's impressive to me that it was moving so slowly out that it didn't pour out. It didn't like make a blob, which is usually what happens. It like poured out so slowly. Like that's very viscous, and it's shocking. This one, did you forget to put the yeast in your bread? This is supposed to be sourdough, I believe, and it looks... You have no leavening agents. This is extremely dense. That's just silly. Once again, talked about this already. Same thing. It comes out and it like bakes onto the side. It did on both sides. You overfilled your pan. You should have used 2. Just saying. This is a very, very dense bread. It also looks very underdone. I don't think it was cooked all the way through. And you also didn't use enough leavening agent, whatever it was. And it needs to be baked longer. It does look pretty on the top. Doesn't mean it's cooked all the way through. You should have tested it. I'm just saying. Okay, I can't really say what was going on exactly with this one because I'm not familiar with this recipe. Pampushki? I'm assuming it's some sort of bread. Like how flat they are, it makes me think that your balls are very, very small. Yeah, and if you didn't have decent leavening agents to make it go up, and it doesn't look like you cooked it in a pan, like the ones on the right, I feel like were cooked in a pan that where they were standing up next to each other and they kind of supported each other as they rose. The one on the left didn't have that support, and also it didn't look like you leavened it at all. Like, did you forget your yeast? I don't know if it's yeast or baking powder or whatever it is. I'm not familiar with the recipe, but that's just silly. This one's not really a fail. I think it's just like these biscuits kind of melded into one. It does happen. I wouldn't stress about that as long as they get cooked all the way through. Although they do look a little bit doughy. Put them back in the oven for another 10 minutes and then see how that works out. Pretzels are really hard to make. Like, you'd be surprised. They you have to dip them into like this like water, like baking soda mixture, and then like hot water, like boiling water, baking soda, and then you take them out and then you bake them. It's really hard to get that exactly right. So like that basically looks exactly like my first attempt at bagels. So no hate from me. I hope they tasted good. So they do look a little funny, but I'm not overly concerned. Macarons are notoriously difficult to make. These basically look like the first ones I tried to make. My best guess on what happened is that they needed to rest for slightly longer before you baked them, because macarons you're supposed to pipe on, let them rest for an hour, and then bake them so that the top is like solid in one piece and will rise as one. But these obviously didn't, which means that you probably needed to let them rest for longer. Similar to these, it doesn't look like you let them rest at all. Like you just baked them immediately. Macarons are hard. Like, that's why I don't have a recipe up for them. Also, your dough looks slightly too thin. It shouldn't be spreading like that. Oh, I understood this is also macarons. I don't know what happened here. Like, your dough is very, very thin and they didn't spread properly. Start over at this point. Like, that's just ridiculous. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't try to make food look like a person's face. Yeah? It very quickly goes into the realm of uncanny valley. If you're not familiar with that term, it means it's something that is trying to be realistic but is just off enough that it makes you feel weird. Gives you this weird, like creepy vibe. That's what happens when you try to make faces out of food. It doesn't look like a face. Also, use thicker buttercream. It's gonna have it's tattooed on somebody's forehead. This one is clearly undercooked. This is supposed to be cupcakes. People will ask me, like, how do you know that? Dude, if the middle sinks, it is underbaked. You should have baked it for longer. You should have tested it before you took it out. If you test it and it's not done, leave it in. Don't take it out first and then test it. You have to test it in the oven. Otherwise, the temperature will go down in the middle too much and then you can't bring it back up. So test it in the oven before you take them out. If they are not done, leave them in, even if the tops look done. These are underbaked. These are underbaked solidly. I don't know how this happens. I do not know how this happens. Like, who puts their glasses in a baking dish and then bakes bread on top of them? I hope it was the person's glasses who baked them, as otherwise they're going to get in trouble. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Is this cheesecake or is this cupcakes? If it's cupcakes, they are grossly underdone. Underbaked. Way underbaked. If they're supposed to be cheesecake, then I feel a little bit better about the consistency. But they're still underbaked if they're cheesecakes. They're just milky, mushy. Ugh. Like, watch your baking time, people. Watch your baking time. Okay, this one was labeled as like one of the worst baking fails. This is solidly not the worst baking fail. Solidly not. The one with the paintbrush on it was the worst one for me so far. This one, no. You need to practice on how to frost a cake. And you never pipe words with anything else other than a small round tip. If you use anything else, like this one, it looks like a pedal tip. You don't pipe words with a pedal tip because it's too thick and you can't read them, as you can see. Another thing that I do when I'm piping words is I will trace them with a toothpick first, so I know that they're fit properly, and then I use a small, round piping tip, as smallest one you got, basically, to pipe the words. I like anything under like a 6 millimeters, really small. Anything less than that has to be less than that. Oh, that's our last one. Thank goodness. But I think I had like 50, so I didn't actually count, but something like that. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed these baking fails. I had fun going through them, so maybe we'll do this again sometime. But send me some pictures. You can send them to me on Instagram or Facebook if you want, and I would be happy to put them in another video. But I thought this was fun, and I hope you enjoyed it too, and I hope to see you in the next vlog.